Hello and howdy. Welcome to AngularAir. My name is Alyssa Nykel. With me, I have the amazing and wonderful Mike. Oh my, I pointed at the wrong side again. Mike is here looking fabulous as ever. Justin is out today, but that's okay. He's with us in spirit as always. How you doing today, Mike?
Not too bad. How about yourself?
Good. I mean, I'm alive. I think that is something to be praiseworthy.
Check that box.
Mike, is that a sports team thing, or are you is that a bank logo?
It's actually the Liberty Bell, so Philadelphia. And it's the shape of home plate. I can't.
Oh, it's a baseball thing.
Yeah. The World Series starts tonight, and the Philadelphia Phillies are in the World Series. So,
what is that a surprise? Are we surprised at all?
Yeah,
we are.
They weren't predicted to be in the World Series, so
okay.
They've had a pretty good playoff run. They are playing the Houston Astros.
Oh my gosh! So it's tonight. Is it? This is going to sound really noobish. Is it in one sitting?
No. Baseball runs playoff series, so it's the best of 7. So the first team to win 4 games. And tonight is game 1.
And the same 2 teams play 7 games?
If it goes that far, yes. They played
and they've always done this?
Mm-hmm. So far this year, the Phillies have played a best of 3 series, best of 5 series, and a best of 7 series.
This is A, crazy cool. B, how come football doesn't do that? It's just like a one and done. You have an off night, doesn't matter.
What? Football's more geared to, since it's like games are weekly, whereas baseball, they play 4, 5, 6 times a week. So,
okay.
It gears itself more to that. So,
I wonder if it's also the amount of physical contact that makes it not able to happen as frequently. I don't know. I feel like the poor football players would be really bedraggled. Well,
they already are playing once a week.
Are we rooting for you? Said the Pioneers. That's the. Yeah.
It's the.
Did I just make that up? Philadelphia Pioneers.
Phillies.
Yeah. Phillies. Who's the Pioneers?
I don't know.
The Phillies.
Here we go.
Oh, that one's so much easier. Yeah, than your mystical symbols. Well, I'm really pumped today because we're going to be talking about Tailwind CSS in your Angular apps. Yeah. And I've done a workshop. I did one at NGConf. And so I'm going to be using a bunch of demos and things that I had prepped for that to kind of show everybody really how to get up and running with Tailwind, what it can provide for you, and essentially should you or should you not use it, right, at the end of the day. So
I like that. Can we start a level B or higher up and say what is Tailwind and why would you want to use it?
Yes,
because that's where I'm at. I've heard of it. I know it's style related, but I've never actually used it.
Perfect. All right, let me go pull up.
So I will be your guinea pig.
I love it. I'm presenting my screen. You should see it. Hopefully share it.
Nope. Yeah, but you muted yourself. Still muted.
I totally got this. I'm really good at life and unmuting. Cool. So this Tailwind CSS in your Angular apps, let's jump in. I have a short presentation to answer some of the basic questions of what it is, why, and how to get it started. And then I'll show some demos. So I do have a blog post that I published this month, and it goes into my thoughts and opinions in more detail. And it also, one of the main reasons I'm pointing to it is because it has links to specific demos on GitHub. And I'll show that GitHub repo in a minute, but it might be easier to have it open if you're trying to follow along. But yes, there is a blog post resource. But Tailwind CSS, you were like, it's styly. Yes, that's exactly it. It's essentially a different way to do CSS. And honestly, I say it in the blog post and I've said it before on stage, but like, I've never really seen a more divisive like library or dev tool. And I've, given a talk about ripping Bootstrap out of your application. So this one people either love or hate, and it's really fascinating. But I think it's because the entire idea is utility-based. And I'll actually show an example of what utility-based means, because that seems kind of vague. But it goes against essentially what you would think the normal CSS path is. So let's say on the, right, left, I'm like really bad at my rights and lefts. On the left side of the screen, you have a card component. It's a purple card component. It's got rounded corners. The normal way, at least the normal, of course, this is all with a grain of salt of the normal way Alyssa would do this, is to, create a div or some sort of element that I can give a class card to, and then go ahead and inside my, preferably not in line. Some people, yeah, that's fine for them, but in a style sheet of some sort, I would give the background, the border radius, all these things to make the card look like the card itself. And this is the normal flow that I have always been taught. Yes. But when you enter utility first flow, specifically around Tailwind, you use these util classes to give those things. So rounded MD, right? Or P10 for padding 10, background violet 200 for that specific shade of violet. And there is no CSS file. There can be, and we'll get into that with some of the demos. But essentially the entire idea is you're using these little util classes to layer on as you need these styles. Now, I will say my first like gut reaction to something like this is like a violent hex no, because just the sheer length, as you can imagine, that your markup would be just so muddied and so bogged down with redundant classes. And there is a way to clean that up, but I think one of the main mindsets, because they built in a directive essentially to help you pull those out, put them in CSS. But one of the main mindsets with utility first is to kind of embrace that chaos and to just roll with it and be fine with it being in your markup. I feel like React people are really, really good with this kind of, that's horrible.
Yeah, I'm with you, because my mind says, hey, don't you want to combine the totality of what these utilities are into one thing to say, hey, if I need to move or change that in multiple places, I'm abstracting that and I'm putting it in one more cohesive utility. But
then at that point, you're getting away from utilities, right? You're then getting back to what we had before with, now you have a card component and you're styling that component. But they do provide a way for you to do that. And oftentimes we don't get a fresh start with an application. So we're pulling this into something that already has, a framework or another library, CSS library, and we're trying to make it work with our design system. And so there is a way to go ahead and say, okay, well, I want card to go ahead and have all of these utils, and I'm going to reuse card in my brand. And I'll show that in a little bit later. But
so essentially that's taken the idea of a component, and that's your utility class, that this is just inside of that component, reusable component, and you're just reusing that thing over and over again.
Yes. Yeah. And I really think, honestly, Tailwind, like after using it, because my gut, like I said, reaction was like, oh my goodness, no, like we need to go back to CSS. And so spoiler alert, right, to Tailwind or not to Tailwind, if you have a team, I'm just going to go ahead and answer it right now. If you have a team that is really, really, really comfortable with CSS, whether it's one developer, your entire team is full stack, whatever your situation is, and maybe perhaps you even have a lot of custom work, custom UI that needs to be built out. An example of this, my job right before this one of the coolest things I ever got to build custom was a color picker. but like the actual pixels of the color picker, I was doing color math in order to build out that wheel and also match it up to our printers to try and give the most accurate representation of what would be printed on fabric in this color wheel on any given display, right? And so I had to be very custom, and I was constantly testing, like, what screen are we on? What are they seeing? How can I adjust the colors based on that to be true to print? And so things like that, if you have a team that's doing something incredibly custom and they love CSS and they're comfortable with it, no, you don't want Tailwind. Tailwind is going to slow that team down. But if you need to do something very quickly in prototype or in production, and maybe your team isn't as comfortable with CSS, it was very, very easy to get into. Maybe that's because I have a CSS background, but anything that I wanted to reach for, I was like, layout, I need flex, start typing flex, it's there. That utility is there. I'd expect it to be there. The names were very straightforward. The documentation is flawless, like absolutely beautiful docs and just really, really helpful docs. And so that's kind of the to Tailwind or not to Tailwind. But if you do decide to try it in order to get going with it, you're going to want to npm it and its dependencies, and then npx Tailwind CSS init to get going. But have no fear, all of that, again, I said the Tailwind docs. Oh, yeah.
There was a question in the chat. Do you know if it's possible to use Tailwind with Figma? I've not used Figma a whole lot, so I'm not sure if when you're styling and building things in Figma, if it's possible to get.
So I believe so. One of the demos I'm going to show today, I actually, because as I mentioned before, we rarely get a clean slate as developers, right? You're pulling things into weird situations. And so I wanted kind of a real life example. So I pulled it into an app that was very heavily using Kendo UI, the component library. And I tried integrating Tailwind with that component library. And Kendo UI actually integrates with Figma and has like a Figma kit that you can customize, export, and then use that. And so I would say, you know, again, spoilers for that demo, but yes, you can. And I didn't specifically, you know, not with Figma, but with Kendo UI, I didn't run into any like weird name spacing issues or any like super generic things that were like clashing with each other. It was just really, I didn't need any important tags. I just started layering in Tailwind as I needed it. And I'll show that demo. It's actually a really cool one. I used it to create dark mode. And so in the entire app. And so I went through and I kind of, you know, applied to different Kendo UI components, these specific Tailwind utilities as I needed it. But again, the docs are amazing. Highly recommend checking it out. And if I were you, I would, Mike's like, please stop forking repos. I would fork your Figma repo, pull in Tailwind and, you know, play with it for the afternoon and see if anything just blows up. Because I can't speak specifically to Figma, but, you know, you'll see why Mike says that in a minute. But so these are that's a little screenshot of the docs. Literally every framework under the sun, they're like, here's how you get Tailwind installed with that framework. That's the docs/guide/Angular for our specific one. But it was really just those two commands. Once you've installed those, you are ready to start including these three Tailwind directives in your style sheet.
So
now a little bit,
there's nothing you need to configure with the Angular. I'm assuming, or let's assume a base Angular CLI project. There's no other configuration that you have to do to change any builders or builder configuration or anything else.
No, I didn't need to, because I ran the npx Tailwind CSS init command. And then after that, I was able to throw these directives into my style sheet, and that gave me access to those util classes. And I was just rolling with it. Like it was very easy and very basic. But I know things are constantly changing in Angular world and otherwise. Seriously, check out their docs, because it does give you that step-by-step guide. Okay. And I'm not going to walk you through installation today, but it was really easy. I don't know. I didn't run into any specific weird things that you're talking about. I just installed it and threw in these directives. I put these in my global style sheet. I know some people have things, you know, different Angular app architecture where things are broken out and maybe you've got like feature modules and things like that. So I'm trying to think of like why you essentially wouldn't want it in your global style sheet. Maybe if you're only using it at the like a component level or something, right? And you're not using it at like the base level. But essentially wherever you need access to those, there's a really cool video and I linked to it in the article, but that talks about composing your directives. Essentially, the order does matter for these guys because base, Tailwind base, that's going to include something called pre-flight. And that is essentially like, does anybody, like Mike, I'm going to date myself. Do you ever use the Eric Meyer reset? Like the CSS, like that's my go-to. And Zach's like, dear God, that reset is so old. I'm like, Eric Meyer cannot steer me wrong. But like, if you like Google Eric Meyer reset, the site looks like it's from the 90s. Like it's rough. What resets do you use?
It's been a while since I've used one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, because essentially the idea of a reset is just to, and hopefully we don't need them, anymore. Knock on wood. But essentially to take all of the base styles for all browsers and bring them down to a common point so that as you add in your brand styles, it's not going to look different in IE versus Firefox versus like Chrome, right? And so Tailwind base includes their pre-flight, which is their reset. And you can actually look in either the docs or what's in npm installed to see what their pre-flight includes. But again, it's just a reset. The component level has its component level styles, whereas utils is those background Violet 200. And so we're going to get a little bit more into that. But before we do, dear God, download this extension.
Another question.
Oh yeah.
So with adding those into your base root style, does it support multiple CSS preprocessors? Will it work in less and CSS and SAS?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. And I use SCSS, so a version of SAS, and it worked very, very well. But I do believe, and we can actually pull it up, but I do believe their docs talk about using other preprocessors. Cool. This one though, and I'm going to show you, like, oh, it's so good. Because oftentimes when you use like a new library, the difficulty or even like a new API that you're supposed to connect to, you're like, what are my endpoints? What's available to me? What exists? So this was really, really cool because like I said, when I'm reaching for layout and I'm like, I need a grid or I need a flex, as I start typing, F or G, it pops down with the available things. But not only does it do that, let me go ahead and pull up this. When you hover over in your markup, like I'm hovering over, right? You can't see the mouse, but text -2XL, it's showing you what's rendering, like what essentially that's going to compile to for your CSS. So that's going to turn into font size 1.5 rems. And then it even goes a step further and says, AKA, I'm going to do the math for you, 24 pixels, right? And then it's also doing line height. So a lot of times with this self-exploration, and like getting into the library, like, for instance, MY5, I was like, what the heck is MY5, right? But it is margin on the y-axis and then 5. And so having this extension, please, oh my goodness, it was just like, I can't imagine doing Tailwind without it. But
so it does two things. It shows you what the details of what each utility class is. And on top of that, it gives you IntelliSense as you're typing to say, if you hit M, to say, hey, I want to specify some sort of margin, and it'll tell you MX, and I'm assuming MX, MY, or is there also MT for margin top, so you can specify that?
Yeah, there is, exactly. So if we start typing M, you'll see that the extension's giving me the option. So you can just say margin on these, but then if you keep going down, you'll have the MXs. And then just like you guessed, there is also MTs and MBs for like margin top, margin bottom, so that you can be super specific. But having this extension
is for Mike Brocky. Just
okay. Let's do MB 36. And then of course, with the hovering over, you're seeing what that's actually turning into, because something you shouldn't fall into, and maybe it's very obvious, it wasn't for me, because I was like, oh yeah, margin bottom 36 pixels. No. It's just an iteration of that. And I think a really good, let's see, like text to Excel, that's a really good example of this. There's text like extra small base, and then there's also 2XL, 3XL. And if I actually use my cursor to go down, we don't even have to select it. We can show what that's going to turn into. But no, it's really, really cool. Were there any other questions right now, or should I keep forging ahead?
There's a question about mono repos, and if there's a possibility of having a shared Tailwind config across apps.
So whenever I was looking into customizing Tailwind, because the docs go into this really well, but there is a way that you can modify your Tailwind config.js right here. And essentially to override things. So like, let's say you weren't happy with like what MB36, let's say you wanted it to be 36 pixels, or if you wanted to essentially like change out their violet for your company's violet. So anytime one of your developers used BG-violet, it was pulling in your brand violet. You can reset that here in this Tailwind config, and that is just at a root level. I know this looks crazy, and it really should be a mono repo, but this, I'm gonna show you all on the GitHubs, on the hubs. This is the, does it count as a mono repo, Mike, even if it doesn't have shared config? It's my repo that has multiple repos in it, but it's not set up as you would expect it to be.
It does count as a mono repo, but it doesn't provide you any of the reusability. We've talked about this.
No, we have. I just was like, should I call this a mono repo? I should call this something else, like a Goliath repo or something. So this one is improperly done. Mike showed me the cool way of doing it.
It's just it's not optimized, and that's okay. It's a starting.
Well, it is, and she's chunky. So if you'd like, Alyssa Michelle is my GitHub name. This one's called, I have a couple of different Tailwind ones. So this one's called -Angular -Workshop. And I'll be showing different demos from here, but a quick briefing on this. If it's 1.0, that's the starting point. And then the 0.1 version is like the answers or the final version of that specific project. But let me go ahead and serve it up. Do you ever have like airplanes flying over your house, but it sounds like a bomb is falling? Like, do you know what that sound that I'm talking about, where you're like, what is this like high-pitched whistling overhead? No? Is that just me in Oklahoma?
I used to live closer to an airport, so I've experienced that.
Okay.
And I don't think I'm able to post that in the chat. I tried to post the link to the repo.
Oh no, you cannot. Can I do it? Can any of us do it? Is it a thing that we are capable of doing? I'm gonna try. All right. So yes, I am serving up the 1.0, and I do believe, back to answer the mono repo question, yes, that you would be able to put your config files, because they're already at the root of each of these projects, as you can see. So I think with some light optimizing that I should have done.
Now that file that you're talking about there, that Tailwind config JS file, did that get created as part of the initialization process?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, she did. And I do have, if you're like very curious on customizing, because I don't know if I'll get to that, 4.1 has a custom config file. And we can, yes, let's pull it up. That I threw in essentially box shadows, a new blue 200, and a new spacing definition. And so you can see anywhere that in that project that those are being used, they're overridden or provided new. Because not only do you have the option of modifying the existing utilities, but you can add to the existing utilities. So, yes.
So is it possible that you could totally confuse people and like change blue to be red?
Yeah, that's what I think
not
that's what
that I
happened
would do
here.
something like that.
Pretty sure that this blue is not. I don't think that. Hang on, we're gonna prove it.
No, I
think that's
believe
what
you.
we
I'm
did.
just thinking of like some of the weird things that I do. Just
yeah, I turned blue purple. So anytime you use blue, it's purple. I was like, I'm pretty sure that hex that I overwrote is not blue. Yeah. So yes, you can absolutely just invert everything and say you're welcome world. But yeah, check out 4.1 if you want. So in this basic one, I just wanted to briefly breeze by some basics, and then we're going to get into actually some layout, some media queries, and some animations, hopefully before we have time to wrap.
I like it.
Because there is a lot that you can do with it, and it is very, I will say, like, it's very fun. Like, I know it goes against this like inner moral guidance that we have as developers, as CSS developers, because, you know, like, good Lord, nobody should be just throwing classes around willy-nilly. But like, it's really, I had a blast. If you can like let go of that part of it. Okay, so
I like the idea, because we talked about the idea of encapsulation and not like just totally loading up your UI with all of these tags and all these classes, but you're essentially taking advantage of the fact of the component is the encapsulation point, and you're reusing the component.
Yeah, that. Absolutely, yeah. And I do think in the docs it talks about, that's one of the things that I really respect about these Tailwind people. They head on address like the icky feeling that a lot of developers get, the negative commentary, and exactly like the reasoning behind why, and if you still need to get away from that, how to get away from that, which I think is very commendable. So, but yes, the first, I have prompts. So if you go to the .zeros of all of these and you're like, I just want to play around with Tailwind, cd into the project, npm install, and then you can go ahead and open up every single one of these, except for I think the Kendo UI one, because she's chunky. You can open up your app component.html and you can see prompts that can kind of like guide you to like use Tailwind. And so, for instance, I'm serving up this one, localhost. Why is localhost not popping up? Localhost. You can do it. Oh. I gotta like remember how to do this. 4200? How is it? I don't even know. Is it like
4200 is the default?
Right, but like, is it colon and then slashes, or is it?
You just go 40. Yep, done.
Okay. Like, where do the slashes go? It's because I signed in into a different account in order to control the StreamYard, because I didn't want to mess up my other one. And I guess this account on this girl's never done localhost. She's crazy. Who is she?
Never met that one.
Let me make this a little bit chunkier. So this is just some base markup. As you can see, our ASCII kitties are wrapping. And so the prompt here is like, we essentially want just one row of ASCII kitties. And I have the clue below. Essentially, we want to say white space, no wrap. And when we save and go back, oh, ASCII kitties are so beautiful, right? But everything's touching the edge, and that's driving me crazy. And that should drive everyone crazy. So we're actually going to go into,
I was going to say something.
And use my favorite selector of all time. Is it your favorite selector, Mike? I need to know. The audience.
Because then I don't have to worry about specificity. Do I add a class here? Do I add an ID? How do I find this thing? And host says, hey.
Do I need to teach this? Do I need to explain the host selector and how it, like, you know, is essentially because of view encapsulation, it's active on our component?
It's this component. It's me. It's this. It's self.
It is the outer wrappings to this component, and we want to give it some margin. Originally, Alyssa would be like, "Oh, but we want to be Tailwindy," and I did tell you that there were directives that allow you to do your Tailwind utils inside. And so here's what we're going to do. We're actually going to do @apply, and then we have access to those utils. And so I can say,
so @apply comes from Tailwind.
Yes.
Cool.
And so, of course, it's because, do you know why? I know why. It's because our host element is not blocky. She doesn't even have, but we don't want to do that, right? We got to fight that. We got to pull that back. You can actually chain them in here as many as you need, right? And so we've now got our margin. We our display block in our host element. However, our kitty cats are still, going rogue.
Yeah,
would recommend we can say overflow clip, so that way whenever it overflows its parent container, it clips, which is what we want. But this, I would recommend where you start styling something to continue styling something. And this is why I went ahead and showed this part so early in the game, because oftentimes you will find yourself like, all of our styles are already in the CSS. And so then it might feel weird if you're going to start sprinkling in Tailwind to have a couple utils in your markup that are competing, say, with your brand styles that are in your style sheet. And so I think if you want to start using Tailwind, you shouldn't fight the way in which your team is doing styling, rather come alongside it. And if it is in the style sheet, great, go ahead and start throwing in apply and layering in those styles. And then maybe one day you move everything out of the style sheet. But I really think it's going to be helpful to at least, keep it consistent and keep it in the same place that everyone's expecting it to be. Because there's nothing worse than being like, why is that purple? Right?
But at the same time, I think it's still a good practice to use at host inside of the style file, even if you're using the inline or in markup utilities here inside of the component markup, because you don't want to necessarily have to create a wrapper component just to be able to Tailwind eyes.
Exactly.
Just to use those Tailwind pieces.
That's why I love that they have these different directives like apply that allow you to go ahead and let me show you. I'm going to serve up 1.1. We're going to speed run because we're running out of time. 1.1. I have so many goodies I want to show you. So I'm going to show you the final product of this puppy. Wee. All right. Open up app. You'll notice in app component, I don't have anything. That's because once I started adding background color, it was only to the little square, right? Because it's just my app component. And I was like, really, this all belongs in our global style sheet here. And so I went ahead and moved. I don't know why I'm a cow all of a sudden, Mike.
Wasn't going to say anything. We're good.
It's fine. It's Halloween, right? Spooky. I moved out things to the body instead of the host selector, just for things like that margin that we expect, that background color, button styles, right? Whenever this obviously is not a ridiculous amount of utility selectors, but if you do end up having just row upon row, which I did get into at some point, of utility selectors for components, I think either it's like Mike said, if your button is encapsulated in a component and then you have those utilities in the markup of that component, that's not so bad. But if it's not, and it's a part of a greater dashboard, and then it's kind of overwhelming. So I think it depends, but there is obviously ways to pull out and apply them. So yes, I think, is that all on this demo? I think that's all on this demo. Let's go ahead and pull up layout. Woo.
Cool.
So I am going to, I'm going to show you these. I've got 6 different layouts, but we're going to just pop to the final version of them. And so we're going to do 2.1. We're going to do flex first, and then I'm going to serve up all of these 2 points. And media queries. And
we're going to fire up 3 of them?
Yeah, all 3 of the 2s, and that way we can just waddle through them like gorgeous angular ducks. All right. Refresh. She did not serve. Did I not serve you? I just feed it into you. All right. So this first one is a flex layout. And she should be live soon. We believe in her. Mike, is your machine, like, I've got a new machine and I just was wondering, is yours this slow?
I have been using Windows of recent, so I cannot say.
Oh,
Actually, I'm right around a year Windows / WSL, so Windows plus Linux.
And is it very fast? Is it like you're happy with its?
I haven't had any issues performance wise.
Okay, wow, that's awesome.
I dig it.
Although, how often are you serving up like 10 projects?
More than I'd like to admit.
Oh my God, really? That makes me feel so loved. Okay, and seen. Yeah. So here I have a bunch of random boxes with randomly generated heights, or cards, we can call them. And they are all inside of a flex layout. And this is just, here you can check out my markup where I have, I'm gonna make this like a little bit smaller and then maybe like chunk that up. Okay. So here I have these literally just divs that are given the class of container. You can hover over all of these if you have that VS Code extension and see what they do. And then I'm giving
now that would be a good point where you're doing your configuration of tweaking those media queries of what those widths are on container, doing that at the config level, and this way it's consistent through the entire application.
Yes. I like that. No, yeah, that's awesome. Yes. And so I actually have, it's my wrapping container element. It has display of flex with the gap. That's the gap between the cards, of course, of 24 pixels, and then a flex wrap. And so if we go ahead and do this, you can see that wrap happening all the way down to small or mobile sizes where it's one column, and then item center. And so again, this is align item center. If I take that off, you'll see that by default, they align to the top because they have different heights. And so it's really anything that you're reaching for on these guys, they like it has anything flexy, anything gritty. I think, let me show you the next one. We're gonna go over to 4201. So I wanted to show, I was showing, that's just like basic, let's start using flex, right? And this is a layout. This one is a little bit, a step up where we have two paragraphs that are side by side. However, whenever we get to a smaller screen size, it turns into a column instead of a row. They're on top of each other. And this is in the media queries example, if you're following along. So it's going to be 2.1 layout media queries. And there are actually quite a few of these, I think they call them modifiers. And in order to get these breakpoints or these media queries, if we scroll down, we'll see that I have, along with flex call, I have SM for small, and then I say flex row. Now, I always get these backwards and I have to like go through it slowly in my brain, like for breakpoints, but essentially with this, because they're using minimum width on their breakpoint, they're essentially saying that is for anything bigger than my minimum width, we're going to go ahead and apply the row and they're going to be side by side. But anything smaller than this parameter, whether you pass small or we can say MD for medium or LG for large, anything that's smaller than that minimum width, just ignore the things that are coming after. And so this with the colon, this pattern here, this SM colon, that's called a modifier. And there's multiple different modifiers. Down here, you'll see on this anchor, I have hover colon underline, right? And so that's that's the hover modifier. There's visited and active and pseudo elements, and we're going to get into some of those in a minute. But essentially, with breakpoints, specifically this one, we were able to achieve that with the media query modifiers. Now, if we go down, question.
With the modifiers. So it makes sense that there's like a reset if I do SM, do a whole bunch of stuff, and then do MD for medium. How do I do a, hey, I'm done using this modifier? So hover.
So for hover. So like you're saying
Would hover, because order of these matter, right?
So because they're using, if we go back to the media query example, because they're using min width, if I go ahead and I do like an LG, it is, and then I'm like, I don't know, background violet. It is inclusive because it is minimum width, and so it would layer. So it's not like it's going to do both of these on large. And so I think with hover, along with all of these, like until you like disable it, it is there, right? So can you explain to me more of an example of like when you'd want to remove it?
So you're doing some stuff with hover, but if you wanted to do some things where it wasn't hover, would you therefore need to do it before hover, or does that make sense?
Kind of. Let me show you. I have.
Like, I'm just wondering if hover, it'll be hover and then the media query is applied only if you're hovering.
Oh.
Does that make sense?
So are you talking about like chaining modifiers, something like this, or no, you're talking about something else?
No, I'm just wondering if the order, so if
so like you're saying if we're like not non-underline or no underline first, and then like that, and then you're saying essentially like this is our default, and then on hover this is our.
Well, no, go ahead, go back to your example on line 4 and put hover before small.
On line 4?
14.
Oh, 14. I was like, where? Oh, right here.
Yeah. Does that mean
I see?
Yeah. Does that mean that that it's only going to apply the small and large, or the small, if you're hovering?
So let's see.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at the selector that it's doing, and it's adding flex row small, flex direction. So the media query is wrapping still around the whole thing, right?
Yeah. But hover is as well.
Yes, but I don't think if we do this, I don't think it's going to change how that was constructed, because you still have your media query wrapping around it and your hover. Like, I don't think our ordering of the modifiers is.
No, it does, because if you put hover at the end of, like, in between gap 5 and margin Y5. That's what I'm saying.
I see. Yeah. And so you're saying essentially if you want it to be included with either the media query or with something else that you're doing, you do need to chain them in order for them to be a part of the same selector.
Yeah. So they kind of need to be in order there. That's fine.
Okay. I see what you're saying. Oh, by order, I was like, no, if I move gap here or here, gap is still gonna be there.
It's just a matter of like what scope of under which mix in modifier it would be a part of. But that's fine.
A part of. Okay. Media query.
This is all part of like the exploratory plane with a new tool.
I love it. This is a full layout where it looks broken. It is not. I'm gonna go ahead and show you. By default, I have, because I did two different things in this example. I wanted to show using essentially flex and grid to make layout happen, not just one or the other. But then I also wanted to show something that's sometimes tricky to accomplish, which is a sticky footer, despite the content's height. And so if we go ahead, I moved our content into this filler content component. If we bring that back in, you'll see it pops down, and you can scroll and see that your footer's still in the bottom, of course. But no matter if we modify that, and that is, there's a bunch of different ways in order to do this, but the way that I ended up doing it, so I gave the host element flex column, and then I'm giving main inside of that flex 1 to tell it as big as it needs to be, as big as it needs to be. So if I go ahead and get rid of flex 1, don't yell at me. It's going to yell at me. And we comment out, you'll see that the footer pops back up. And so I also wanted to show you just these things working together. So the header it's using grid with 2 columns in order to align. And I love this about dev tools. I'm actually going to bring back our filler content and show you. At the end of the day, it's just a way of doing CSS, right? It's just a way to, I'm going to make this a little bit bigger, and you need to be much bigger. But it's just a way of applying all these tools that we've already had. So at the app root, you see that flex call, and you have flex and dev tools that I can hover over, and you can actually see it. And then if we open it up, you'll see the grid that's being applied. If I click on it, you can see the different sections of that grid. Go even further into the nav. He's using flex in order to get those nav elements to line up the way they are. And so, yes, I love this example. It's more real lifey. I think, unless we have any questions, we can go ahead and move on to some animations. That was just essentially achieving some layout in the flex.
And more about quarter tail.
All right, we're gonna bust through some animations.
I like it.
And all right. All the servers. You have anything fun planned this week? Are you guys trick-or-treating this weekend?
Monday is trick-or-treat. The only day that has it's calling for rain in the 10-day forecast.
Oh no! Are all the outfits waterproof?
No. My youngest is going to be a deer, and there's fur. There's fur and what have you. Oh. Never mind. It is no longer calling for rain on Monday. Yay!
You're good. You're golden. So
We're
you
good.
guys don't do the month-long fall festivals though, because we've been going to almost every night.
Yeah, I mean we do things like that, but this is the actual scheduled time in our township for trick or treating.
All right. What's your go-to? You just do your neighborhood or what?
Yeah. Oh. We're in a community, so lots of houses and. The streets are packed with kids, and it's a lot of fun.
Is there I'm not providing ports, so it's going to be mad at me. Yeah, go ahead and use a different port. Is there a kickoff time for this? An expected, everyone's going to go out at 6 or now?
I think our times are 5:30 to 7 or something like that. There's scheduled times, and this way the streets aren't crowded at different times. You know when to expect people to be coming to your door and when not. And
yeah. Okay. I like that. Okay. I'm going to open up our first example for animations. There is a lot of modifiers for animations. And I want to preface this with a quick brief. Again, Tailwind, of course, is doing nothing magical, nothing new. It's just a way of accessing things that already exist in CSS. And when you think of CSS animation, sometimes people can get really overwhelmed. So I like to break it into 2 different camps for CSS animations. There is the first camp, which is transitions, which is a start and a stop point that you can allow the browser to transition you between. And then there's keyframes for if you need in between stages, if you need to say at 0%, at 20%, at 50%, at 100%, do these things. And it really is that basic and that simple. But people in the front end community will consider things like, for instance, on this hover state, right, where I'm not transitioning the background color, it's just popping back and forth. But if I add in a transition for the background color, it counts as an animation, right, in CSS. So on this one, I had to get fancy with it. And so here, I'm not only doing the background color, but I'm scaling it and I am moving it by 1 pixel. So if we go into, I'm gonna move this a little bit smaller so we can see the different chunks. So
move it an entire pixel. Nice.
Hey, it's a cool effect, all right? So 1 whole pixel. Each of these sections here in this demo in the app component HTML is each of these colored sections. If you're curious, I want to see the transition one. So here you can see we're applying hover background, right? We're applying on hover. We want to change the background. We are also scaling it by 10%, and translate means to move. It's a scary word. It literally just means to move. We're translating it Y by -1. We're going up, or I guess by 1 pixel, not -1.
Is that what the dash in front of translate means? Is that you're going
actually yes,
-1?
yeah, it does, because they're I think I have it in margin somewhere. Yeah, down here on, you can see margin left. If you see that negative before the entire util,
and that's because they're hyphenated.
Mm-hmm.
Like the separator is the hyphen. So
I know.
rather than having to
so
do
how would you
dash,
say negative? Yeah, no. Although double dashes would be kind of funny. Although I don't know. I think the leading dash is that
makes sense.
It's good. I like it. Okay, we got a book. So this next one, there are some built-in animations. With, you can see here, this SVG spinner is animating. There are some built-in animations. This one is called, if I scroll down, we'll see, it's just an SVG circle, and animate spin was applied to it. And just to prove that, I'm going to go ahead and throw it, animate dash spin, on the whole section, and you'll see something ungodly happen. You're welcome. So it's literally just spin, but there are, I think,
do it again. Do it again. Thank you.
You're welcome. I will preface this with, just because a tool exists doesn't mean you should use it, and your users should never notice your UI. But if we go ahead and do the animate dash, you'll see we have spin, ping, pulse, and bounce as built-in animations. Let me hover over this to show you what that's turning into, because this one is a keyframe. So as I said before, our transitioning of these properties on hover counts as an animation, but there's also keyframes that are a bit more. I have down here, we only have like 7 minutes. So I have down here, I was playing around with duration and delay. And so this button has a different, like the 150 delay, the 300. This one has a 0 delay, but 1000 duration. And I just wanted to show you the effect that timing can have on transitions. This one is really cool. She's the exact same, you'll see, as I like hover over them. But Tailwind provides a way to, a modifier for reduced motion preferences, whether it was something that was like set like in the application itself, like in the JavaScript, or whether it was something that like is coming from the user's preferences. And let me show you, I'm going to open up my system preferences. This is actually like when I was creating this demo and like trying to find an accessibility where reduced motion was, this is actually where I found increased contrast. And it's like what turned my VS Code into this white monstrosity that you see here today. But I love it because I have such bad eyesight. So I didn't turn it off. And my husband, every time he sees my computer, he groans a little bit because he's like, oh God, it's all so ugly. And I'm like, shush.
If you're hearing that message, then I will not repeat it.
I am hearing it on the daily. Cool. But reduced motion, if you check that in your system preferences and go and hover, you'll notice that these just pop back and forth. They are not doing any delays. They're not doing any durations. And
we have a question in chat.
Oh yeah, tell me.
First time chatter. His name is Schwartai Shorty. Hello, Justin. And he's asking if there's a way to do the reduced motion without using Tailwind.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and say yes, since again, Tailwind is just a way of us accessing CSS. So let me go ahead and turn off reduced motion, but I'm going to go back over and show you what Tailwind does. Scroll down to the A11Y. You'll see on each of those, I have the motion reduce modifier, but it is just a media query that you yourself can use with or without Tailwind. I would suggest you using it more at a global level, maybe even in like, this is our our ally area of styles where we're specifically talking to anything in our application that has motion, because I'm just imagining everything having motion reduced transition none, motion reduced hover transform none, and like it just would be a mess. So
I could see people see that hovering that you're doing right now. I could see people liking Tailwind and using it on some projects, but also using it as a tool if they spin up just, hey, I have a Tailwind project sitting here. It's maybe not my main work project. Maybe it's just a side project that I have sitting there, to maybe use that as a learning tool to say, for this exact thing, hey, I want to be able to turn off motion in my application where I'm not using Tailwind, and I can go and steal or copy that exact CSS and pull that over into my project where I'm not using Tailwind, but get that same behavior and use it as a discoverability tool.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, and honestly, like, if you use Tailwind, you need the extension, like, period. It's just brilliant. I can't imagine doing it blind, but seeing, like, just like you said, seeing what it's turning into, and it's, at the end of the day, it's all CSS. So it's beautiful. I want to tell you before we get off the subject, I know we're running late. I'm doing a lot of .NET and cross-platform stuff, and I actually learned there is a media query that Apple uses, because on Apple devices, they have this bar now on some of the newer devices, and that bar is actually like on your web app or on your mobile app, like it's over content. And I was like, oh man, I'm going to need to use like JavaScript or some sort of like native API in order to see if they're on that device. But there's actually a CSS media query for that, that you can go ahead and say, are you, on this type of device? Go ahead and give a little bit of padding on the bottom. So I think media queries are vastly underused, and there's so many that I'm like, oh my God, that exists, like reduce motion, right? So very, very cool stuff. We have 2 minutes. Mother of God. Okay, let me show you one more, Mike, one more. Hey God. Well, it chose its own. I didn't tell it to go. Let's see, it's 56972. We can do this. 56972. And I'm not going to have time. Oh yeah. So this one was a really cool custom. I wanted to show you a subtle real life use case. And this is their animate bounce. And you can see that bottom arrow, because our content is below the fold, is bouncing. Click on it, it scrolls us down and it disappears. But when we scroll back up, it reappears. And so I'm using some JavaScript bits to go ahead and integrate with Tailwind bits to accomplish this, but I did want to show like an example of using animations tactfully.
And which example is this, if people want to go to the repo to be able to take a look at it?
Yeah, that was animated full. Lots of other examples. I think the last one I'm going to show is the Kendo UI one, because I promised earlier I would. It is called 5.1. Advanced ng serve. We'll do port 4202. So this application is where I went, and I'm not going to show the code. I'm just going to show the finished product. But like I said before, I went, and it was very heavily using the Kendo UI component library. And I went through, sprinkled in dark mode using Tailwind. So there's actually, as soon as this serves, I'll show you a button at the top of my My Little Pony Tour of Heroes application now that is for toggling light mode and dark mode, but I also do cache that preference so that if you come back, it stays the same. But essentially, it was really, really cool. It's complete. Let's check it out. Localhost 4202. And we can go ahead and close you. It was 4202. Oh, there it goes.
Yep, you're good.
So I'm gonna take it back down. So light mode and then dark mode. And so was this difficult to do with Tailwind? Not at all. The only difficulty was that I have components inside of components, like over here in this side dashboard. And so I couldn't use all of the same dark mode styling for every component. I had to have, like, if you're a component inside of a component, be a little bit different so that you had that layering. But that was the only weirdness I had. But I loved it. I had a fantastic time learning Tailwind. But again, if we go back to that slide that I had of to Tailwind or not to Tailwind, it really, truly, I hate this answer, depends on you and your team, your comfort level, your customizing needs. and whether this will work for you or not. But I had a blast. And again, their docs are killer. So would highly recommend at least playing around with it.
So with your workshop that you've done with this content, are you by chance scheduled at all to do that again? That somebody might be able to attend your workshop?
I will throw it out there at a couple more conferences. I currently don't have any on the roster. I'm kind of doing a weird, like I just got back from Poland and was doing a .NET conference. And so I'm kind of like expanding my horizons beyond Angular right now. And so I will throw out this workshop more and tweet about it. But currently, no. But yeah, do you have any picks or anything? I can stop screen sharing now so we can wrap. Sorry for going late, everybody.
I don't think I have any picks this week.
No? Okay. Well, happy Halloween.
I mean, other than the World Series starting. Yes.
In the World Series. Is there like a go-to snack you eat during a baseball game? Is that a thing? No?
I used to be big on sunflower seeds, but they're very salty, so I've been cutting back. But I used to chew and spit out sunflower seeds, so that was my thing.
Sunflower seeds. Yes. Well, happy Halloween, everybody, if you celebrate it, and happy weekend if not. And I think that's all. That's a wrap.
Thank you for presenting, for being our host and guest and presenter and panelist and jack of all trades.
It was fun. A happy weekend, everybody.